Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Tim at 10. I hope everyone is having a really wonderful day outside. Those of you that are joining me live this morning, welcome. Glad you are here. Those of you that are watching the recording of this, wish you were live, but hey, at least you're watching the recording, and that is all good. All right. We have a very, very important topic to discuss this morning, Parent Code of Conduct. This is such a critical part of your parent handbook. If you don't already have a chapter on Parent Code of Conduct, I'm going to strongly encourage that you add this to your parent handbook ASAP, as soon as possible. But we're going to go through the purpose behind the Parent Code of Conduct, how to enforce this particular policy, and then just go over some of the most common policies that are typically added to a Parent Code of Conduct in your parent handbook right here. All right, so that's what we've got going on this morning. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This training topic has been verified and approved by the Texas Early Childhood Professional Development System, otherwise known as TechPEDS. So please make sure before you complete your assessment this afternoon or once you get done with this training, make sure that your personal TechPEDS workforce ID number is entered on your Tim the Trainer portal. So that way your training certificate will automatically be uploaded into your TechPEDS account. I say automatically, it usually takes about 24 hours, but that makes your life so much easier as an administrator, as a director. So always keep that in mind right there. If you have any questions about any of the material that we're going to go over this morning, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, those of you that are participating live, you can type that into the chat screen or the comment screen, and we can answer those questions or have that conversation. Those of you that are watching the recording of this, you can call me, you can email me, or if you go to our website, timthetrainer.com, in the upper right-hand corner, you can send us a message straight through our website with any questions that you have about the material, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training, we are always here for you. That way we can respond in a timely manner, and it meets the definition of instructor-led training with child care regulations. Lastly, just remember that training must be completed in a reasonable amount of time per the child care minimum standards. The way I like to define a reasonable amount of time is that you cannot complete more clock hours of training in a single day than there are hours in that day. But really, you cannot complete more clock hours of training than the total number of hours worked in that day. That's what licensing is looking at for a reasonable amount of time. So just give those reminders to you right there. All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning to everyone who's saying good morning to me. I'm so glad to see you all here. Awesome. Especially for this particular topic. We talk so much about, these days, everyone's window of tolerance is so narrow. Everyone is so quick to get triggered when the world is not going their way. And sometimes behaviors come out that are not appropriate for a building full of children. And we have to keep in mind that even though none of us would be here today if it wasn't for the families that have their children enrolled in our programs, they are our customers. They do pay our salaries, and we appreciate them and have a lot of gratitude towards them. However, they must also conduct themselves in a professional manner, all right? And if the behavior of the parent poses a threat or a risk to the other children in the program or the adults in the program, they are prohibited from being on your premises. I'm going to refer you a couple of different times in this webinar to the Child Care Minimum Standards 746-3703. All right, 3703. And I encourage y'all cut and paste this like right into your parent handbook so they can see that this is not you, kind of making this stuff up. This is coming straight from the state of Texas. Any person whose behavior and or health status poses an immediate threat or danger to the health and safety of the children must not be present. All right? So we've got to stick to that. All right? And then also, this is also in the child care minimum standards when you look at general responsibilities. When you look at record keeping and you look at operational policies, we talk about suspension and expulsion of children. In that technical assistance box, you also see that the center may always retain the right to disenroll a family when it's in the best interest of the facility. So the other children in care, the teacher, the adult, or that particular child. Even though that is in the child care minimum standards and that is a good safety block for you, it still needs to be in your parent handbook that you always retain the right to disenroll. Okay? Now, for this particular topic, we're going to be very specific, not on the children's behavior that would cause expulsion from the program, but the adult, the parent, or the guardian, all right? And what type of behavior would get them expelled. And I'll tell you, and I've had this conversation with some of you already, in the last 6 years in particular, we have de-enrolled more families for parent code of conduct than I have in my entire career. And it's happening all over the state. It's happening all over the country. I was just in another state a couple of weeks ago coaching a school that had to de-enroll a family due to parent code of conduct. So, it's kind of happening everywhere. But that's what I started with, is recognizing that there are so many people with very narrow window of tolerance and they just snap. But they've got to conduct themselves in a professional manner. In the early education industry, we tend to have an issue. Hocus pocus, time to focus. I might be talking directly to you. I don't know. Sometimes we have an issue where we let our customers run our business instead of you running your business. All right? So you gotta put your big girl and big boy panties on, and you gotta run the show right there. Okay? That's what it's all about. Always take a look at this and realize that conflict is an opportunity for you to lead. All right? We got to pivot. When you're facing a difficult situation, especially when you do have a disgruntled parent or a disgruntled employee, instead of looking at it as a conflict, instead of you looking at it as, an obstacle in your school, this is an opportunity for you to lead. And people are watching you. Your other families, your other customers are watching you. Your employees are watching you. The community is watching you. And they're determining what type of leader you are by how you handle these types of situations. You got to build that confidence up. All right? Have that positive and optimistic mindset. Know your stuff. Know your policies backwards and forwards. Know minimum standards backwards and forwards. All right? And so when you do have a parent that is not meeting an expectation of the school, you get the opportunity to lead them. And it might be, depending on the behavior, you lead them right out that door. Okay? Now, here's the other beautiful thing that I really want to make sure y'all get today. Being a private business, one of the beautiful things about being a private business, you get to pick and choose your customers. All right? No one is forcing that parent to be enrolled at your school. If they don't like your policies, if they don't like the way you handle a situation, if they don't like the information that you're giving them or the information you're not giving them, y'all, it's super easy. They just go right out that door. Nothing is forcing them from staying there. All right? And as we kind of go through this material, this is the other thing I really want y'all to keep in mind. We live in a world right now where people feel like they're entitled to more information than they should be allowed to be given. All right? Information should be shared with people on a need-to-know basis only. All right? Especially when it comes to privacy and confidentiality. A lot of times in our setting especially, because we're dealing with young children, we're dealing with families, and you have a substantial amount of employees. Keeping their personal information private is critical, all right? And sometimes parents want to know, how did you handle this situation? What did you do? Can't share that with you. That is private and confidential. If I had to discipline an employee, if I had to discipline another family, if I had to suspend or expel another family from the program, all right, that's none of your business. Can't share that with you, all right? And again, sometimes you got to put your foot down on that. The way I've always worded this is, do you trust me? If you trust me, then you trust that I handled the situation accordingly. If you don't trust me, why are you still here? All right? Y'all, that trust is important. We got to build that trust right there. I love this comment right here. The way parents interview us, we have to interview the parents too. Some parents are not right for your program. Oh my gosh, drop the mic, Erica. You nailed it right there. You know, not really off topic. I'm not going to say this is off topic because I think it is on topic. On your enrollment records, your admission form, enrollment form, whatever you call it in your world, instead of calling it an enrollment form, call it an enrollment application. All right? When you have a parent that comes in and they want to take a tour of your program, all right, you're interviewing that parent. Change the verbiage. Just because you fill out that enrollment form and you take a tour does not guarantee you're going to be enrolled in this program. All right? So change the intent. Now, we've got to be careful with discrimination. We've got to be careful with protected classes. We've got to make sure that we're treating everybody equally. But yeah, I could not agree with you more that we should be interviewing our families to make sure they're a good fit. And if you pick up on cues like, well, we've already been kicked out of 3 programs. Okay, tell me more, right? Why have you been kicked out of 3 programs? Is it because of the child's behavior or the adult behavior? Okay, we need to know more about that right there. So sure, I love that. Good job. So I mentioned the discrimination piece. Always be familiar with protected classes, race, color of skin, national origin, religion, gender, creed, someone's belief or convictions, veteran status, disability, marriage status. These are all of your federally protected classes. Anytime you're dealing with someone that falls into a protected class, and y'all, honestly, pretty much everyone falls into some type of protected class, okay? But you do need to be familiar with them. You've got to make sure that you're enforcing your policies exactly as written. You don't ever want a situation to come back to you where the family is saying, you treated me differently than the other families in this program, because they can very easily slide in, you treated me differently because of my protected class. And you're going to have to prove that that's not true. And sometimes that can be very difficult to do. When I do trainings on discrimination and protected classes, y'all, this is actually super easy. Treat everyone the same. Enforce your policies the same, no matter who it is. All right? And then, of course, document. That is the best way to avoid any type of discrimination type issue. We talked about, do parents have a right to know everything? No, we've got to be careful with privacy laws. We got to be careful with confidentiality. We mentioned that earlier. Is it legal to dismiss a family? Yes, it is. Now, again, make sure that this is in your parent handbook, that you have a right to dismiss, and refer to the child care minimum standards. Like I said, under record keeping and under operational policies, that's where it's listed right there in the technical assistance box. But you want to be very clear in your policy manual what type of behavior will get that parent dismissed. All right? And so that's what this training is about right here. I do have a training on my website called Suspension and Expulsion of Children. That one is particular on the behavior of the child that would lead to expulsion. In that type of situation, if the behavior is due to a disability, there are some extra steps that needs to be taken to prevent you from having a wrongful dismissal lawsuit or a wrongful dismissal claim. But, that's only towards the child. All right? Doesn't have anything to do with the parent right there. And then when we talk about who gets to make up these policies, you do. And, it could be based on your circumstances. It could be based on your community. For the most part, Parent Code of Conduct is pretty blanket across the board. These are pretty and that's the whole deal, y'all. These are pretty common sense. You just need to behave, all right, and handle yourself in a professional manner. Again, just a reminder, policies are only as good as they are enforced. Your job is to set these boundaries. Do a comprehensive review of your policy manual at least once a year. If you find that there are policies that are not being enforced, you need to do one of two things. You need to either start enforcing them, or if you're not enforcing them, they need to come out. All right? We have seen many situations where attorneys and the court have used programs' own policy manuals against them. All right? You dismiss a family, you dismiss a child for this particular reason. Well, here's all these other families that have violated a policy. Why did you choose to enforce this policy and not those? All right? And we have seen this in many, many cases right here. So, follow those policies. If you're putting it in the handbook, you got to be willing to enforce it. All right? One other thing before we get into the actual policies that I want to recommend for y'all. Employment practice liability insurance is an optional insurance policy. It's commonly known as EPLI. This is going to protect you in third-party situations like this, in particular wrongful dismissal from the school. So it is an optional policy. I strongly recommend it, and I would not operate a business without it. Again, it's employment practice liability insurance, and it's really, the purpose of it is to protect you from employee-related claims like discrimination, failure to promote, failure to hire, wrongful dismissal, those type of things. But it does typically have a third-party component that would cover you in these type of situations too. All right. And another comment that just popped up, make sure that your staff understand and practice your policies. Absolutely, everybody needs to be on board with this. That's why I always share with the employees both the employee handbook and the parent handbook, because I rely on the employees to help enforce the parent handbook. Well, they can't help enforce the parent handbook if they're not aware of what the policies are. Okay? When you give your people their policy manual, whether it's your parents or your employees, there are 5 characteristics that need to be in your acknowledgement statement. Okay? Very, very important right here. So always make sure that on your acknowledgement statement that the parents and the employees sign. They received it, they've read it, they've had the opportunity to ask questions, they agree to follow it, all right, received it, read it, understand it, had the opportunity to ask questions, and they agree to follow it. All right? Those are your 5 characteristics right there. Now, I get this question all the time. What if they don't agree? Well, then they don't get to come to your school. And you don't let them start until you get that acknowledgement with that signature. All right? So then they can't come back and go, well, wait a second. I don't really agree with that policy. Well, you signed off on it. So you either follow it or you go away. I want to talk just a little bit about perception before we get into some sample policies right here. Being a leader, it does take a lot of skill, and you have to be able to see the world from other people's point of view. And especially when you're dealing with conflict, when you do have an upset parent, try to see the situation from their point of view. It's really easy for us to see a situation from where we stand, all right? But try to put yourself in their shoes. And if this was your particular child, how would you feel in this situation? Now, that still does not, make an excuse for the behavior of the parent. So if they're coming in and they're being very aggressive, they're threatening, that's still a big no-no right there. But trust me, it's a lot easier to handle these situations when you can see the situation from their point of view. All right? I understand how this must feel. Okay, if I was in your position, I would feel similar to how you're feeling right now. And those are some good words to follow right there. Your job as the leader is to get your followers to see your version of reality. And especially working with young children, we have to practice this a lot with our families because the child's version of reality is very different than the actual version of reality. So we're not saying anyone is a liar. That's a trigger word for me, by the way. When someone says, oh, that person is a liar, that's such a trigger word for me. Instead, let's practice saying their version of reality is different from my version of reality. So again, just kind of changing those words changes the perception right there. But we've got to do that, all right? And then create that safe environment. Mentally, emotionally, and physically, do the parents feel safe when they come into your program? I could do a 2-hour training just on this sentence right here, all right? When you have an environment that people feel safe in, and again, we're talking mentally, emotionally, and physically feel safe in your environment, they are less likely to get triggered. When they are in a safe environment, it's going to be easier for them to compose. It's going to be easier for them to practice self-regulation. Because our brain is constantly searching for threat, our brain is constantly searching for danger. If they are in a moment of upset and they walk into an environment where they don't feel safe, the brain is going to attach itself to survival. All right? And that's typically where this explosive behavior comes out. I don't know why my screen just made fireworks, but that was actually pretty appropriate right there. That was kind of funny. Yeah. And then I'm going to refer back to my training that I have on my website called The 10 Principles of Discipline. Adults must always see themselves as role models. And as a leader of the program, when you are dealing with parent upset, you've got to be the role model. You've got to be the person you want that parent to become. If you get frustrated, if you get upset, if you get triggered, my state influences their state. All right? So we got to practice this a lot. Taking those deep breaths, pausing before we respond, pausing before we speak. All right? So what I hear you saying is, and then you restate whatever the parent says. But add that pause, add that deep breath before you respond to that parent who is in upset. You don't ever want to react to a parent that is upset. We want to respond to the parent that's upset. Y'all see the difference? Reacting and responding. Okay? We practice this technique called pivoting, where you pivot to the expectation. All right? My child came home yesterday with a dirty diaper. So you were hoping your child would have a clean and fresh diaper on when you picked up in the afternoon. That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So do you see how I took the negative and I pivoted to a positive? All right. That, when you pivot to the positive, you pivot to the expectation. You're sending acknowledgement to the upset person, but it's also keeping you in the higher centers of your brain. You're receiving this negative comment, all right? And if I were to respond or react and say, so your child came home yesterday with a dirty diaper, that's sending me into the lower parts of my brain, which at that point I'm either going to get emotional or I'm going to get into fight or surrender mode myself. When we pivot to the positive, so you were hoping your child would have on a fresh and clean diaper whenever you pick up. That's keeping me in the higher centers of my brain so that I too can stay composed, I can self-regulate, and I can handle this upset parent. And my state is going to influence their state, which is going to help them calm and regulate. Okay, let's get into some of the most common sample parent code of conduct policies that we see out there. If you feel like this is applicable to your school, by all means, add this to your parent handbook if you don't already have it. If you don't think this is applicable to your school, then you don't need to add it. All right. So first thing I have, language. All right. Parents and visitors must understand that young children are present in your building. Some adult language is not appropriate for young children and other adults. We got to remember the beliefs and the convictions of other families, other employees in your facility. Put in there the name of your school, prohibits offensive words on our premises. This includes but not limited to swearing or cursing. Please also be mindful of the music that may be heard from your vehicle when in the parking lot. I know this kind of sounds silly, but when I've had to address offensive language, it's usually not the language that's coming out of the parent's mouth that is offensive, but they pull into the parking lot and their radio is so loud everyone can hear, and the music they're listening to contains a lot of offensive language. And then the other parents or whoever's on your parking lot can hear that and they get offended by it. Like, seriously, y'all, I've had to address music in people's cars more than I had language out of their mouth. And this is where we go back, and you look at the child care minimum standards, and it gives very clear definitions on premises and grounds. All right, premises and grounds. We need to make sure that same definition is in our parent handbook as well. And it's not just appropriate language or offensive language, but it could be lots of other categories right here. Your premises or your grounds includes your building, your sidewalks, your parking lot, your driveways, your yard. All of this is included in building and grounds and premises. So we got to be mindful of that right there. All right. Now, when we talk about offensive language, from time to time, an inappropriate word might just fly out of somebody's mouth. Look, I am the first person to admit that, sometimes words come out of my mouth that, might be offensive to other people. I try to stay very mindful of that. I try to stay very conscious of that. Depending on the conversation and depending on the moment, these words might fly out. And then, oops, I made a mistake and I've got to correct myself. Okay? Yeah, that's going to happen. All right? What I think we have to focus on here is the context. All right? What context is the word being used, and what is the body language and the tone? If you're just having an everyday conversation, a playful conversation, and a word slips out, oops, let's be careful, We have young children and other adults that might be offensive to. That's just an oops. Now, if the parent is extremely upset and aggressive and use this type of language, that's a completely different context. All right? So keep that in mind right there. This is probably the biggest one right here, threats and confrontations. And I would even put this one like in bold print in your parent policy. When you are orientating, a new program, a new family to your program, I would make sure that you go over this. And I understand that my little face bubble is covering part of my slide. I will fix that on the recording right there. So basically this policy is going to state, from time to time, parents may have questions about their child's care and education. The name of your school promotes open communication and discussion. We expect parents to handle disagreements in a calm and respectful manner. That's what I would put in bold print right there. Threatening staff, threatening children, or other parents will not be tolerated. You have a right to terminate care in the event of disruptive behavior from any parent, guardian, or visitor. Make sure you put in there. In order to maintain safety, all threats will be taken serious. In addition, all threats will be reported to the appropriate authorities and will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. And this is where I'm saying refer to the Child Care Minimum Standards, that's 746-3703. All right? And this is what they've got to understand. They have to handle these situations in a professional manner. This is where we've really had the struggles here lately, and I get phone calls and emails from y'all all the time on this particular type of situation. We've got to be firm. We've got to be consistent. If anything is perceived as a threat, they got to go. And y'all, after they've been disenrolled from 2 or 3 programs, they're eventually going to realize that they're the problem, not the program. Are they probably going to lash out at you on social media? Yep, probably. All right. But y'all, seriously, I would not get too worked up about, someone trashing you on social media. Just take a good look and make sure that they're not violating any privacy or confidential laws. All right. But, you have a parent that starts going off on you because you de-enrolled them from your program. Trust me, people are going to read through that. They're going to see straight through it, especially if this person has a habit of posting these type of comments. The problem is not the school. The problem is with the person publishing the comment. All right? So there you go. The minimum standards is 3703. Then we go on to discipline and guidance. All right? And this is something that is required by child care licensing. You are required to have a policy on discipline and guidance. And your parents and guardians are required to follow your discipline and guidance policy while they are on your premises. This is not anything new. This has been in the standards for a long time now. But it tends to still be an issue. So you're going to put in your policy manual that parents must follow particular rules on discipline and guidance as outlined in the Texas Minimum Standards for Child Care Centers. All adults, including parents, must follow these rules while on our property. Regardless of the parent's personal beliefs on corporal punishment, failure to follow our discipline and guidance rules will lead to immediate termination of care. Please refer to our policy on discipline and guidance for further explanation of our expectations. All right. So, probably the biggest thing we see here is a parent comes in to pick up their child. Oops, they didn't keep it safe today. So the parent wants to take the child into the adult restroom to give them a spanking or something. You know what? If that's how they handle these situations at home, that's their prerogative. As long as the child is not being abused or neglected or exploited, all right, the parent's belief or conviction on punishment is totally up to them. But while they're on your premises, they have to follow your discipline and guidance policy. No exceptions to that, all right? Doesn't matter who sees it, who hears it, who is aware of it. Just cannot happen on your property. And I have seen many programs cited by licensing for this right here, where it was the parent that spanked the child, not one of the employees. But because it happened on the premises, the program gets cited for it. Okay? So this is why, again, we kind of have to have a zero tolerance on this one. Oh, let's take a deep breath here. The use of tobacco products. Just when we thought we had this one down and people understood that they cannot smoke cigarettes or have chewing tobacco or snuff or whatever it is on your premises, then comes the e-cigarettes and the vaping devices. Y'all, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. All right? So I feel like we've started this all over again with getting people to understand that the use of tobacco products, including e-cigarettes and vapes, are prohibited on your premises. Once again, this is your building, your sidewalk, your parking lot, your yard. All right? All of that right there. And I wish I had $1 for every time. Just in the past 6 months, I've seen parents and employees walking to the front door of the school with their vape pen or their e-cigarette, and they taking puffs all the way up to the door. All right? That is a problem. Okay, so we need to make sure that we fully address this right here. So the sample policy that I have, per the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, the use of tobacco products is strictly prohibited on our premises. This includes, but not limited to, cigarettes, vapor devices, and chewing tobacco. If you want to elaborate on this definition, go for it. All right. And I like to add in our policy, in both the employee handbook and the parent handbook, evidence of the use of tobacco products is prohibited. So I like to add the word the evidence, meaning we don't want to see it, we don't want to smell it, this type of stuff. Because sometimes, where I've really had to address this in the past is not so much the person smoking on the premises, but coming into the building and smelling. And, if you have a child or you have a family or an employee that has asthma, that strong odor could trigger that asthma, right? These type of things. Probably one of the hardest parent conversations I've ever had to have in my career was a mother with twins. They were twin infants, and I had to have a conversation with her about the cigarette smell from the car seats or the car carriers that she was bringing the children in, and it made the entire building smell. So that was a fun conversation, but we got through it, right? And then it ended up, mom got very defensive at first, but then after she saw my version of reality, she was very apologetic and she took action to correct the smell of the car carriers when she brought her infants in. That was a tough one, though. All right. Safety issues, this one is kind of like a roller coaster. We'll go through periods of time where we have to address a lot of safety issues, and then it seems to get better, and then it kind of comes back right there. So definitely you want to make sure that safety practices, especially during drop-up and pickup times, is when we typically have these type of concerns. You want to address this. Oh, someone is saying in the comment section, diaper bags. Yes. Probably in the last 3 years, we've had to coach programs. Probably, 10 different programs in the last 3 years. We've had to coach them on dismissing the family because of marijuana in the diaper bag. That tends to be an issue right there that comes up from time to time. But it's pretty big right now. We're going to talk about that one in just a minute. So on safety practices, the name of your school has policies and procedures in place to maintain a safe environment for all children, staff, and parents. Safety practices must be followed by all individuals on our premises. Violation of our safety policies will lead to immediate dismissal from our program. We ask that parents be mindful of safety practices at all times. This includes, but not limited to, allowing children to enter and exit the building unsupervised, allowing children to run in the hallways, opening the secured front door for individuals, and being mindful of personal belongings brought into the center during drop-off and pickup time. Okay, so there's quite a bit that's covered right here in this particular sample policy. The children running in and out of the building, up and down the hallways, children slamming into that front door. All right, this needs to be immediately addressed with the families. We have had situations where, children have ran out of a building and been hit by cars. There was a big incident about 15 years ago here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where a 4-year-old child darted out of the front of a center and was ran over by a car in the parking lot. And it was, came down to being the parent's responsibility. The child was signed out, so they were out of the care of the program, but the child ran down that hallway, hit that front door, went right into the parking lot and got ran over. Luckily, he survived, so it didn't kill him. But it was a bad situation right there. Okay, so lots to address right here. You can add or reduce whatever you feel is needed for your program, but this is a really critical policy for you to consider right here. Got to keep our program safe. Parents need to take on that responsibility. And sometimes we get, I just don't know what to do with him. Well, you got to figure it out, Mom. All right, you got to figure it out. I don't know why this one always makes me laugh. We shouldn't have to address this, but we do. Appropriate dress. All right, when families are coming in to drop off and pick up their children, they need to be dressed appropriately. Let's just start off with, they need to be dressed. All right, I have operated many schools in my career that were located in neighborhoods, and sometimes mom and dad or guardian want to run home and get out of their work clothes and get into their little exercise gear and get the stroller and walk up to the facility, and they come in wearing almost nothing, right? We need to address that right there. So parents need to be mindful of appropriate dress attire when on our premises. Young children and families have different values on what is appropriate or offensive. We want all families and visitors to feel comfortable when they're on our premises. Adults wearing offensive or inappropriate clothing or lack of clothing will be asked to leave the property until appropriately dressed. All right. And if you want to add to this, if this behavior continues, it may lead to dismissal, right? But, we've had that situation before. I've had to have conversations with some of the parents, the fathers sometimes, who they think that they are, God's gift to women, and they want to come into the program, looking a way that they look because they're trying to get the teacher's eye. And no. All right. This is not a place for you to try to pick up our teachers. All right. This is where you need to be picking up your child. All right. Not trying to get the attention of, some of our teachers. And I have had to address this actually many times, stop trying to pick up our teachers. That's very inappropriate. All right. I didn't add that slide to this presentation because it's actually part of another presentation, but definitely you want to have that type of policy that relationships, intimate relationships between your customers and your employees are strictly prohibited, all right, and will lead to both dismissal and termination of employment. You've got to be really careful with intimate relationships between either your customers and your employees or employees and other employees. Because while it's intimate is one thing, and then as soon as it's not intimate, it can very quickly turn into sexual harassment. All right? And that's just not the purpose of our business. Okay? So we do need to address those inappropriate relationships from time to time as well. Our confidentiality policy, very important. We do have our employees typically sign a confidentiality agreement. For parents, this is typically just listed in the parent handbook. It's not a separate document, although it could be. All right. But the way this basically would look is that, you say the name of your school takes the responsibility of maintaining the confidentiality of all persons associated with your school very serious. Parents need to be aware of the confidentiality of all children, families, and employees, not just their own. Any parent who shares any information considered to be confidential, if they pressure employees or other parents for information which is not necessary for them to know, this will be considered a violation of the confidentiality policy and will be dismissed from the program. This includes, but not limited to, personal information posted and shared on social media. All right. So, for example, the first and last name of a child, the first and last name of an employee, that is private information. When you look at most social media sites, all right, there's going to be terms and conditions to social media sites. Any violation of a term or condition can get that person revoked from that site. It will also get the comment removed. If y'all go and you read it, pretty much every single site out there, any information that violates privacy is a violation of the terms and conditions of that website. All right, those are really easy to get removed right there. It does take a little bit of time. That's the bad part about it right there. Now, of course, currently in the United States of America, everyone has a right to voice their opinion. And so they can go onto social media and they can post their opinion about your school or your business. They can post the opinion of that teacher or that classroom, but they can't violate privacy. All right? So using specific first and last names, that would be a violation of privacy. So we've got to be aware of that right there. The use of alcohol, again, strictly prohibited on your program. So put in the name of your school prohibits any parent from entering the facility when under the influence of alcohol. If a parent enters the facility with any sign or indicator that they are under the influence of alcohol, will be immediately dismissed from the program. Now, this one could be an hour-long training in itself. All right? This is a double-edged sword. And this is why this one has to be taken so serious. On this side of the law, if you have an individual that comes into your program and there are indicators or signs that they are under the influence of alcohol, and if you allow that child to leave with them and there is a serious accident, you could be held accountable. However, on this side of the law, a parent always has a right to access their child. Biological parents always have a right to access their child. If you deny a parent access to their child, that's kidnapping, right? So when we talk about the use of alcohol, it's a double-edged sword. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're either going to violate here or you're going to violate here. So that's why you've got to have a zero tolerance. Anyone that appears to be under the influence, it's grounds for immediate dismissal. And I say signs or indicators or someone who appears to be under the influence of alcohol, because you don't have breathalyzers in your school, right? So you can't say that person is intoxicated, that person is drunk. You can't do that, right? But you can document the signs or indicators, okay? Now, because you've built your business on relationship, because you've built your business on trust, hopefully, if you have that parent that comes into your program and there are signs or indicators that they are under the influence of alcohol, you can say, hey, Mom, looks like you might have stopped at the nail salon and had a couple of glasses of champagne. Why don't I call Dad and have Dad come pick y'all up? Let me call you an Uber, right? And hopefully, because you've built your business on relationship and you've built your business on trust, hopefully that parent will comply and you can handle that situation that way. Otherwise, you're going to activate your crisis plan. You're going to call law enforcement and let them come and handle it. Again, this could be a 1-hour training in itself because this happens quite often and it does need to be handled in a very particular way. For parent code of conduct, we just need to say there's zero tolerance for this. All right. And that leads to my last sample policy, the use of marijuana or other illegal drugs. All right. So this is very similar to the alcohol. Your school is going to prohibit parents from entering the facility when under the influence of marijuana or any other illegal drug. If a parent enters the facility with any sign or indicator that they are under the influence of marijuana or any other illegal drug, they will be immediately dismissed from the program. This includes, but not limited to, the consumption of marijuana by mouth or by smoking. And we've had to elaborate on this one over the last couple of years because people aren't just smoking their marijuana these days. Most people are consuming it with a gummy or an edible or whatever it is that they're doing. The bad thing about the consumption of marijuana is that you don't get the smell, you don't get a lot of the indicators, all right, that you would typically get from the smoking. You still might get the glassy eyes, the slurred speech, the lethargic, reaction, but it's a lot harder to tell when someone's under the influence of a consumption, all right? Just do the best you can right there. This has become probably it is in the top legal trends that we're dealing with in the industry right now is the use of marijuana because we have more and more states that are legalizing this either for medical or recreational use. Still illegal in Texas as of today, all right? But it's getting a lot harder. If and when this ever does become legal in Texas, it will be handled exactly the way alcohol is. All right, while it may be legal to consume it, you cannot be under the influence of it when you're at work, when you're driving a vehicle, when you're picking up and dropping off your children. It's going to be no different from that right there. So we want to keep that in mind. All right. So those are the sample parent policies that I have on Parent Code of Conduct. I'm sure that there are some others that may come up in your world. If you want to give me a call, shoot me an email, send me a message on my website. I'd be happy to discuss those with you. But hopefully this was helpful right there. All right. Thank you all so much for participating today. I'm going to go ahead and put in, for those of you that are live, no, I'm not. Hopefully Kent is listening, and he's going to put the link to complete your assessment. Those of you that are wanting a certificate for today, you can complete that assessment. There is a $5 fee for the certificate. If you just want to watch this video for the knowledge, you can do that for free. Most of you want a certificate because you're smart. All right. And so there it is. Thank you very much. There is your link to complete your assessment. Thank you all so much. I will see you next time at our Tim at 10. I appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye.